do this. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so we're on Samach Beis Amid Beis, and we're going to start actually a new sugya. It's a continuation, but it's new. And if you recall, last week we spoke about Rav Safra's theory, which is an interesting theory that you don't see much in Shas, that the halachas of our halachas are somehow linked to the halachas of the secular courts. Because we talked about a situation where it says, Kol she'ilu b'dineim motziim malva as an example. Wherever the secular courts say the lova has to pay the malva, then b'dineinu machzir malva then it's incumbent upon the malva to repay the lover. So somehow we're linking our halacha to the halacha of the secular courts. And of course, the Gemara then explained what all of that means. We won't review everything, but at the end of the day, what we came out with, we wanted to understand what kind of, in other words, by ribis. So we said that's a case of ribis katsutza. What we just said is ribis katsutza, which is midoraisa. So midoraisa, you have to return the ribis, but in the secular courts, they can force the lova to pay the malva because the lova owes the malva the loan. They don't care about ribis katsutza or anything, but in our halacha it's ribis katsutza, and therefore you have to repay it. So the Gemara then wanted to understand, according to Rav Safra, what's the chiddush? What is it coming to tell us? So we said at the end, and that's how we ended, is that remember it said kol she'ilu b'dinei motzian mimalve lelove. No, sorry. Wherever you kol she'ilu b'dinei ein motzian b'dineinu ein machzirin. If you don't take it from, if the secular courts say no, we don't say no. So the Gemara says, what's an example? So he says, ribus mukdemes and ribus ma'acheres. That's sort of preliminary ribis or post ribis. And what we said that means is, let's say you give a gift to a banker. Okay, I'm giving a gift to the banker. I want to have good relations with him. I want to do business with him. Fine. Then he issues a loan. So what we say is we're not going to link that gift to the loan for it to appear as ribis. Two separate things. So when he says mukdemes, it means you gave him something beforehand, or you gave him something as a thank you. I do business with somebody, they send me a thank you. They send me champagne, a big bottle of champagne. Is that ribbons? That's not ribbons because it's a thank you. It's a thank you. So as long as they're separated out, it's okay. And so that's how he wants to come to explain our sugya. All right, so that was the end of that. Now the Gemara is going to recount a portion of the Mishnah and ask a different kasha. So here we are, Kesad, right? Where is it exactly? It's about, I don't know, 8 lines maybe, by the two dots. See where the two dots are. But maybe 8, 10 lines from the top. Says the Gemara, referring to the Mishnah, Kesad, what's an example of ribis? Lokachimenu chitim b'dinar zahav, hakur, v'chein hashar. So remember what we said in the Mishnah. So this is not ribis ketzutza. Because ribis ketzutza midiraisa is only in the situation like where you have a ribis up front, like a loan. In business, where ribis can appear, because you're conducting business, and sort of all of a sudden you borrow 30, and the item that you're borrowing, chitim in this case, is now worth 40, as an example. That's ribis, but it's only ribis midrabanan because it's not sort of prima facie ribis. So the Gemara, he's now recounting what the Mishnah said, that someone who lent chitim bedinar zahav akur, and zina akar is 25 sloim, right? V'chein hashar. This is important. V'chein hashar, and the price for the wheat was established, meaning. So the Gemara tries to explain, and I think maybe Rashi talks about it, is that in the early part of a harvest, when everything is sort of moving parts, you don't know the value of the product. because you don't know, is it going to be a good year? Is it going to be a lean year? Are the prices going to be higher or lower? So, you're kind of playing fast and loose. But once the produce of that year already sort of comes out, then you can establish a price because it's pretty steady. That means v'chein hashar. V'chein hashar, that there was a market price and everybody knew it. Okay, so what's the situation there? So now, in the case of the Mishnah, what happened? He paid for the chitim, he paid for the wheat in advance, and then, and let's say he paid a court, paid 25 sloim, and then market factors, the price increased, right, and it became worth 30. So the chayra, he made a profit of 5 sloim, or five dinarim actually. So he made a profit right there. But what's the case? The case is the fellow whose chitim is now inflated by 5 comes to the other guy and he says, you know what? I want to cash in my chips. I want to take my chitim because I want to buy wine. All right, that's the case of the Mishnah. He wants to buy wine. So the owner of the chitim says, you know what? I also happen to have, I'm a wine merchant. I happen to have wine. So you know what? Instead of going out to somebody else, come to me. I'll give you credit for the 30. Now, mind you, it started at 25, but it's now worth 30. And he says, but I'll give you 30 dinarim worth of wine. And he says, sure, let me do that. So he can do that, but the Mishnah has one caveat. What's the caveat? The caveat is that he has to have the wine. He has to have the wine with him. In other words, the wine has to be accessible to him. And so the Mishnah says this is a case of ribis, right? It's a case of ribis. And the Mishnah says the reason why it's ribis, because even though they established a price at the beginning, which when there's a shar, when there's a market price, it would seem to be okay. The kicker here was that he didn't have the wine in stock. And I think we touched on this before, where the item is not in stock, then you can't say I have the item, and therefore, if there's prices increases, then it would be ribis. Mind you, it's only ribis to Rabbanan, but nevertheless it's ribis. So the key here is because he doesn't have it in stock. So this is the takeoff. This is a repeat of the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to ask a kasha. The Gemara, what's the big deal if he doesn't have it? You're telling me that the reason why it doesn't work is because he doesn't have the wine in his possession. Let me show you something. Tanya, we learned we learned a Mishnah in Poskin ala Paris. So remember, we talked briefly about the concept of Psika ala Paris. Psika ala Paris is an advance contract. In other words, we're going to negotiate a deal at a fixed price, and you're going to deliver those goods to me again as I need it, or maybe over a period of 6 months or a year. But why is it okay? Because they agreed on the price. So therefore, you would think if they agreed on the price, that should be sufficient. Now, wait a minute. Is it sufficient? So the Mishnah there says, a postal verse, hashar. So the only reason why the psikta ala Paris, the advanced contract, is good is because the prevailing market price was established, right? So once you have a market price, right, then poskim, then you can enter into a psikta de shtar. Even though he doesn't have the wine. So that brisa, once you entered into the price, it's okay. But what happens if he doesn't have the wine? It's also okay. So you see a Beferish Mishnah that says that you don't have to have the product with you. We're answering here and we're saying the reason why you can't make this deal that the Mishnah talks about is why? Because the seller doesn't have the wine with him. Here's a Beferish Mishnah that says you don't need to have it. Now, why is it that way? Because even though you don't have it, yesh lozeh, someone has it. It doesn't have to be you. And you don't even have to have made a deal with that third person. But since you can go out and you can get it, why can you get it? Because there's a shar, there's a market price. No one is going to tell you, oh, it's different. It's a market price, right? So if it's a market price, even if I don't have it, someone has it. And if someone has it, then I can get it. So why does the Mishnah tell us that the whole Inyan of the 25 and the 30, and therefore he wanted to wine? The reason why it wasn't good because he didn't have it. You don't need to have it. Someone has it. That's the Gemara's kasha. So it's a kasha on the Mishnah wants to say that that is ribis midrabanan, and the key is because he doesn't have it. So this is the Gemara's kasha because remember we said at the very beginning at the time of the Mishnah that there are a couple of exceptions to the rule of ribis drabanan, and one of them is yotza hashar. What does that mean, yotza hashar? When there's a prevailing price, everybody knows it. Then that's the agreed upon number. So fluctuations don't matter later because there was an established price. So we're not worried about ribis because there was an established price. Now, there was another exception, if you remember, that was the yeshlo exception, because yeshlo means I have it in my possession. So even though I'm not going to deliver it to you later, since I have it, it's really yours. You, the buyer, it's yours. So if there's an inflation in the price, you're getting the inflation, not me. So in other words, there's no ribis because it's your own produce, and your produce went up in value, and that's okay. So this is the Gemara's kasha. How do you understand the whole Mishnah is now dependent on this question of Einlo that he doesn't have it? We don't need that, even though he doesn't have it. We don't need it. That's the Gemara's kasha. It's a good question because it seems like from our Mishnah, it all hinges on that, and we brought down another Mishnah that it does not. All right. Omar Rabbah, so now we're going to understand. Rabbah comes and says, so here we're going to introduce something that's a little bit different. And the Gemara says that our Mishnah, we're talking about where the seller who sold, he took upon himself a chiyuv, a debt, right? And how is he going to pay the debt? He's going to pay the debt later on when he gets the produce. He didn't get money, he got a debt. Here, Rabbah says, there's a big chiddush, there's a difference if you make a deal with a debt or you make a deal with money. If you make a deal with a debt, it means, like our case, where the seller says, no problem. You want to convert your chitim into yayin? I have yayin. But since I owe you the money, I'll owe you 30 dinarim of wine. Says Rabbah, that's not good. Where you're dealing just with sort of a verbal, I owe you, I'll pay you. No, you have to have hard cash. There's a chiluk between making a deal with money or making a deal with a chayv. And when you think about it, there's a certain sense to that, is because diburim, when I talk to you and I said I'll sell it to you and we have a debt, it doesn't have the same sort of imprimatur as someone who makes a deal with money. Money is a finite, obviously money is something that we all use. It's a finite sort of event. I pay you, that's it. When you speak out words, I owe you a debt, I'll pay you, it somehow gives the impression that there's something still hanging around. We don't have a actual deal. We don't have a final deal. So that's what Rabbah wants to capitalize on and says, our Mishnah is speaking about what? There was a debt. I owe you the chitim, and I'll pay you in wine. The Brisa, the Mishnah that we just quoted, is actually speaking about money. He paid him the money. So Rabbah wants to make a distinction when there's money or when there's a chov. And that's an interesting thing which the Gemara is now going to extrapolate on, that there is a difference how you make a deal between the two. Now, um, so and Rabba wants to give a raya that what he just said is valid because he's making a big chiddush to understand how different deals you treat them differently. What does he say? Kidatanya, we learned in the Brayta, Hare Shahoya Noisa B'Chavera Mana. Let's say I lent mana, let's say $100, and I have a claim for the $100, right? So in that particular brisa, v'holach ma'omad al goreinu. All right. So I lent you the money, and now you happen to have a produce or you have a field, you have a threshing process. V'holach ma'omad al goreinu. So I, who lent you the money, came to you, and I stood on your goreinu, on your where you thresh, where you do the business. V'omer, and I said, "Kain li ma'osai sheni rotza likach mehen chitim." All right. So give me my money, because remember I lent you 100. Give me my money because I want to buy wheat with the money. Oh my lo! So the borrower said, "Chitim yeshli, ani noiselach." This is my business. I'm threshing. I have the wheat. I can pay you the wheat. So says the Gemara, "Save asay olai kishar shel achshav." So he says, you know what? Okay, let's establish the market price of the wheat. Um, what is it worth? Remember, if it's a shar, then the transaction has validity. So he says, all right, let's establish the market price. And I'm going to give it to you. You don't need it all now. So we establish the price. This is the price of the wheat. I'll give it to you in 12 installments. I'll give you one installment every month. And this way, I'll pay you back your loan. Says the Gemara, says the Bryce there, Osir. Why? You can't do that. It's forbidden. Why? Delo ki isure habol yodedame. Because it's not as if he got, isur means money, isur. It's not as if he got hard cash. So the Brisa itself is telling us that in that particular case, the reason why it didn't work is because there was no money that actual transferred. It was a debt. And the debt he'll pay him over 12 months. So Rabbah wants to prove his theory from that Brisa because the Brisa says, Beferish, you know what? You can't make that deal. I mean, it's Rabbi Rabbanan, he says, because there's price fluctuation. Even though it's a shar, there's a prevailing price. So that should be enough. And so he says, shar is not enough. You have to have a combination of a prevailing price and money. So that's an interesting chiddush that Rabbah tells us. And that's why our Mishnah, which says that when the seller didn't have wine when he was making the transaction, and that's the reason why it's not good, is speaking about a debt. It's not speaking about money. So in the case of a debt, that's what we said. If he ain't low, if he doesn't have it, not good enough. Then it's already ribis d'Rabbanan. But if he would have had the money, and from this brisa, it proves that when you have the money, then you can make all kinds of deals. I can transfer it over a year, 12 months. It doesn't matter when the price goes up, price goes down, because the money itself has already been paid, and that is the sort of the final sort of analysis of the deal. So now I'm free to make the deal, but pay you whenever, it doesn't matter, because I paid with the money. So that's a chiddush. That's a chiddush that the Rabbah tells us that there's a distinction between debt and money. I mean, in our lives, in what we do today, we clearly see that debt. I mean, everybody considers debt to be money, right? If I owe you 100, I owe you 100. No one's coming to say, "Oh, I owe you 100," and therefore there's no, it doesn't mean anything. So, but at the time of the Gemara, you see that they did hold that money had a greater cheshivas, and therefore, if you don't transact in money, you open yourself up to ribis derabanan. Okay, so fine. So this is Rabbah. Does it make sense? Anybody have any question on that? Does it sound good? It sounds good, right? Difference between a chayv, a debt, and kesef. Frek the Gemara. Wait a minute, Rabbi, you're coming to tell me this gewaldige chiddush. Amalei Abaya. So Abaya says, wait a minute, Rabbi. Idelo b'yisura habor liyado. Um, if you're going to tell me that the whole case turns on the isur, on the money, isur is a coin. So not isur, a forbidden, but isur, a coin. So if you're now telling me that this whole rationale of why you can do this is become when money is traded hands, my area ain't low. Why does the Mishnah tell us? You know why it's not a good transaction? Because he didn't have the product. He didn't have the product with him. Wait a minute. Why would it have mattered if he had the product? Even if he had the product, it would not have been good because it was still a debt. It was a chayv. It wasn't money. So this is a tremendous kasha on the explanation of the Mishnah, which says the only reason why you can't make, in our Mishnah, the only reason why you can't make that deal is because he didn't have it in his possession. So the inference is, if he had had it in his possession, it would have been okay. According to Rabbah, it would not have been okay. He didn't have money. All he had was a debt. And Rabbah is saying that a debt is not like money. So Abai is asking him the kasha from the language of the Mishnah. It disproves your theory, Rabbah, right? Because your theory is that you have to have the money. So afilu yeshlo nami. So even if he has the product in his possession, right? It still isn't good. That was the whole. We contemplated. Oh, if he would have had it in his possession, it would be okay because then he can make the deal. But you can't make the deal. He didn't have money. It was only a chayv, and we're saying that a chayv is not good enough. So that's a tremendous kasha on Rabbah. Again, you see how the nuance of the Gemara is that we're sort of hanging on every word that yesh lo, ain lo. Okay, he has, he doesn't have, but now we're making on top of yesh lo, ain lo, we're making a chiluk between choiv and money, between a debt and between money. So that's now a bias kasha on Rabbah. So Abaya now wants to come and he wants to give us a new theory on the case, right? So he now has a different interpretation of what we're talking about. Elo Amar Abaya. Abaya says, Masnissen kiditoni Rav Safra beribis debei Rabbi Hyatt. The Rav Safra that we talked about last week, right? That Rav Safra. So he said that our Mishnah is interpreted according to Rav Safra, Ribbis to Rab Chia. In the yeshiva, Rab Chia, when they were learning Ribbis, he says, that's my interpretation of what this case is about. What does it mean? It's not Rav Safra, Ribbis to Rab Chia, because Rav Safra says that understanding Ribbis according to the yeshiva of Rab Chia, Yesh Devarim Shehem Mutarim, there are things that are perfectly good in business, no problem, but the isur mipnei haramas ribis. So now we're extending the ribis issue into a new realm. We're talking about ribis, and we're talking about whether it's ribis ketsutza or not ribis ketsutza, and whether or not you paid it with money or you paid it with a chov. No, the reason why there is an isser of ribis is not because there's actually ribis. There's haramas ribis. There's something that looks like ribis, and someone is going to misinterpret and say, "Oh, that's okay. I can make a deal like that." When in fact, okay, Ketzad. What's the example? Omalo halveni moneh. I say to you, lend me a moneh. Omalo. So the lender says, Mona ainli. I would lend you the money. I would lend you $100, but I don't have cash. Hidden b'money yeshli. I have wheat worth of money. I can give you. So what's the inference? The inference is I don't have the money to give you, but if I give you chitim for a mana, you can go out and sell or do something with that chitim, and you'll have your mana. He doesn't need chitim; he needs money. But if I don't have money to give him, then I'll give him chitim. Now, what happened? That's what happened. He gave him the chitim as a loan. Now, let's say the deal was you pay me back in 30 days. Okay, take the chitin, pay me back in 30 days, no ribbons, nothing. Because of the locha haimena be'esrim v'arba sela, and a money is 25 sela. So now, 10 days later, before the expiration of the 30 days, the borrower says, oh, I need money right away. I don't have time to go out into the market and negotiate. He says to the lender, I'm going to send you back the money, the chitim, for 24 slime. The money is 25. So he loaned him a chitim for 25. And then the borrower said to the seller, he went back to the lender and said, can you take back this chitim for 24 slime? Because I need it today and I can't take the time. Says the Gemara mutter. That's permissible. Something don't sound right, right? You lent him 25, you sold him 24, something doesn't sound right. Says the Gemara, but also last game if they have ribis, because at the end of the day, it will look like a ribis deal. It is not a ribis deal because you can't sort of cross the line between the loan and the sale. If I lend you something, ribis can only appear in that transaction, not in another transaction. The second transaction was I sold you the chitim for 24 slime. I still owe you. Remember, in the loan, he still owes him the chitim worth 25. He owes it to him. But since he needs money right away, he wants to cash in the chitim, and then he'll pay the loan back another time. So what does that sound like to you? Does that sound like one transaction or two? Says the Gemara, it sounds like one transaction, and that's ribis. Says the Gemara, no, it's not one transaction, it's two transactions, but it's haramas ribis. It looks like ribis. So if someone is watching this whole thing, they're going to say, wait a minute, you just made a seller here. You sold it, you gave it to him for 25, you got it back for 24. And on appearances, they would be right because that's ribis. That's classic case of ribis. But the reason why it's not ribis is because they're two separate transactions. One is a loan and one is a sale. But the fact that they're sort of truncated together gives you the impression that the lender made out here like he made out because he got an extra seller. So that's what the Gemara says. That's what a buyer. This is novel. This is a novel question, right? Because Rabbi asked a question. If you're going to tell me that the chilik is Rabbah between debt and money, then why did the Mishnah say ein lo? What's the difference? Afili yeshlo, even if he had it in his possession, if you're dealing with a chov, it's not good. You have to have hard cash. You have to have money. So Abaya says that the chiddush here is that it has to do with haramas ribis. That the reason why there's a distinction between yeshlo and ein lo is because of the appearance of ribis, and therefore, even though now remember we're dealing with ribis d'Rabbanan. So we're already once removed from the Isra and the Torah. This is not Torah ribis. This is not ribis ketzutza. It's ribis d'Rabbanan. So you might argue, okay, it's not so bad. It's ribis d'Rabbanan. But here we're watering it down one step further because the ribis d'Rabbanan, right? The ribis d'Rabbanan is not really ribis. It's two transactions. So you're almost two steps away from the Raisa instead of just one. Midrabanan, you can't have ribis. We say, okay, that's one step away from ribis ketzutza. But here, it's two steps. It's not only not ribis ketzutza, it's midrabis rabbanon, and it's not even ribis because it's haramas ribis. So therefore, Abaya comes So now, what's the pshat? How does Abaya differ from Rabbah? So he just gave us the basic building block that our concern is Haramas Ribis. Okay, says Abaya, Hochi Nami in our Mishnah. Now let's get back to our Mishnah. Gondama Halveni Shloshim Dinorim. Right, this is the case of our Mishnah. He came to him and says, I need money. Please lend me 30 dinarim. Amalei, Shloisha Denorim mainly. I don't have the 30 Denorim, but Chitim b'Shloisha Denorim, Yesh Lishani Noisin L'cho, I will give you 30 Denorim worth of wheat. Again, the same case we were talking about. And he gave him, Nosin Chitim b'Shloishim, he gave him uh, the the value of Chitim b'Shloishim. How do we know it was a Shloishim? Because there was a shar. There was a market price. So everybody knew what the market price was. So when he doled out the chitim b'shloishim, it was clear that it was b'shloishim because that's what the market said. B'choza dinorim, and then he said, "But I need wine." So he gave him back the 30 dinorim. Malach haimenu b'dinar zov. But what did he do? He gave it back to him. He bought he bought it back with a dinner. A dinner is how much? 25. 25. So there's a 5 dinner difference, right, between what he lent him and what he bought back. That's exactly the case that Abaye just quoted before. There was a loan and then there was a sale, right? So that's the chilek. He's saying that our Mishnah isn't talking about um, a loan for a loan. It's talking about a loan for a sale. And if it's a loan for a sale, it's not ribis. It's haramas ribis, but it's not ribis because there's 2 different transactions. After that sale, he still owes him 30 denarim as a loan. Now, where's he going to get it from? Well, that's his business. Either he'll get it from somewhere else to repay him, or maybe because he got the 24 slow him back, he'll make a better deal and he'll have more money to repay that loan. But the ikar is that there was a distinction between the loan and the sale. And that's what the problem becomes, is because when from the outside looking in, someone doesn't see the distinction between a loan and a sale. They think it's one and the same, and therefore it turns out to be what? Ribis. So therefore, Abaye says it's not ribis because we're learning it in a different sort of way that that he's going to sell him back the produce and then he'll owe him the money. Okay. Now, so now we're back to a different kasha. The kasha of Einlo. What was the kasha of Einlo? This is by the quote of our Mishnah, and the end of our Mishnah says that if he doesn't have it, then it's ribis. If he doesn't have it in his possession. So before we gave an answer, you don't need Einlo because you're dealing with what? Hard money. So Rabbi says when you're dealing with hard money, Einlo doesn't matter. But according to Abaya, that we're not talking about hard money. We're talking about a loan, and it says Einlo. Um, so now Rabbi Abaya wants to now explain why it's important to have it, and the Einlo is a problem. What does he say? Let's say the borrower has the chamra, the wine. The yovle b'shloshim dinar that he was going to give him for 30 dinar, right? He has the din, he has the wine. He's going to give it to him for 30 dinar because that's the price that it appreciated to. So peiruhu dukar shakel minay. So he's taking a payment for the wine, the less lambah, and not a problem. But the elo, if he doesn't have it, given the less lechamra, vade mashmol zuzi minay. But if he doesn't have it, if he has it and it's a debt, okay, they make a transfer. But in Einlo, if he doesn't have it and he takes back the wine, That really looks like ribis because there, the difference is that when people see the money transacting, you understand, okay, there's a deal here, and therefore the money has it takes away some of the sting of, let's say, ribis. But there was no money here. So in Ainlo, if he doesn't have it in his possession, then it really looks like ribis because he got it for to 25. Now it's worth 30. So according to Abaya, it still makes sense why the Mishnah says Ainlo, because that was his kasha. My Ainlo. According to Rabbah, there shouldn't be an Ainlo issue. And Abaya gave a different interpretation according to Rav Safra. And now Abaya is saying, and according to my interpretation, it makes sense why there's an Ainlo, because at the end of the day, it appears to be ribis because you have not, because there's no money in the transactions. Okay. So let's take a look at some Rashi. Um, let's see where we are. I think we did one of the two Rashi, a couple of these Rashis last week, so maybe we'll just repeat it. And Poskin ala Paris, it's about, I don't know, 15 lines or so from maybe 20 lines from the top by Rashi. You can't make a psika advance on Paris. Lit lomos Bakur chitten. Below malo, he can't give it to him with a kur of chitten. Below malo, mineo lila man gadol. Afili sheyesenos loso achshav bekach betchilas hakatza ein zeh shar. So we said that the only reason why sika of Paris is okay is because there's a shar. Atziyecha hashar refursam bekavua b'shuka ear. So our problem was that if you made an advanced sale and there was no established price, that really opens the door to ribis. So again, you have to have a prevailing price. As our Mishnah said in the beginning, that was one of the exceptions to ribis, is that you have a prevailing price. So even if the jumps, if it changes, the market changes and it has a different value, not a problem. Okay, so we said when the Gemara says ein lo, so ein lo means he doesn't have. So we interpret that what it means ein lo, that yesh lo zeh, that leish acher, somebody has it. The fact that you don't have it is not a big problem. You go out into the marketplace and you'll see someone who has it, and you'll buy it, and you'll give it to him. So that's ein lo zeh, yesh lo zeh. So he says misnissen. Now we in our Mishnah, b'bo l'chov b'demei maskinin. So nosen lo zeh hamerchen lokeach demei achitin shechayiv lo. He didn't give him the demei achitin that he owes him. Sheyach v'kiblo himenu b'shul hayayin. And lebo lasas alav demei achitin chov v'lifzok ala chov yayin. Right? V'chein omalo ani mekabel olai chitecho b'lamed dinner. I will accept your chitin for 30 dinar. Kamosha ata yochel amochrim, that you can then sell it. V'hariloch etzli behein yayin kishar shal achshav. Right? The yayin havakodin lo me'achshav. If he had had the wine in his possession, it would have been an immediate sale, and there would have been no issue, no question of ribis. The Iker Rishuse, Iker. And if he takes it out as a Rishus, he takes it, but it's already established. Aval ein lo, but if he doesn't have it, he didn't get money that he could say So think of it this way: if you have money, and we know that money is really sort of the bottom line of currency. If I give you money, you can go to anybody else and buy it. But if we're dealing with a chov, with a loan, what are you going to do? Now he has to go to a third person and he has to say to the third person, you know what? I need to have chitin or yayin in this case for this person, but I don't have the money. You loan it to me. He's going to say, what do you want from me? I'm not going to loan it to you. So again, in Rabba's theory, the kesef, when they say well, cash is king. When you have kesef, then you can make all kinds of deals. But if you don't have kesef, then it's very hard. It's almost impossible for him to say, I'm going to pay you back because he doesn't have the money. So that's sort of the anomaly here, and why Robin says that it's important that our situation has to deal with money. So the Tanya, because we learned in the Brisa, what does the Brisa say? Sheyesh hefresh. There's a distinction between nois and mos, the ball of b'chova, and that's what we're saying. That so Rashi is saying that everybody knows there's a distinction between paying money and dealing in something less than money, meaning a chov. Now a chov we take a chov seriously, but it still isn't money. So think of it this way: if I pay you money, our deal is over, right? I get it from you. I pay you the money. If a chov still lingers, isn't there the possibility that that chov isn't going to be paid? Isn't there a possibility he's going to say, I can't pay it you now, I have to pay it you later? So because it's a gray area, Rabbi, in a sense, is correct by saying there's a chiluk between a chov and money, because the money is finite. The deal is done. I don't have to think about it. But once there's a chov, I still have to worry about it. So there really is something to Rabba's theory. So he says, "V'ani elo l'cho hachitim." So that case was where he took the money and he said, "I'll pay you over 12 months." Okay, v'ani elo l'cho hachitim kol shnei mosar chodesh. I'm going to pay you for 12 months. Af im yitlu demeyem. So he says, okay, I'll pay over 12 months. This is what it is. We have a deal. I'm not going to renege. What happens if it goes up? I'm not going to ask more money from you because we have a deal. We're going to stick by our deal so that I'm not going to benefit from the fact that it now has appreciated in price. Right? Below ki isure habol yodinami. Because it's not, again, this is a hoax. It's not like he got an isur, he got the actual money. She'ein zeh domeh lenosen isur b'shah shepoisek. It's not comparable to where he actually gave him money at the time that they made the deal. Again, the whole point is that money is fungible to everybody. You give me money, I can go buy something in the market for money. But once you're dealing with a chov, you're not dealing with something that everybody is willing to undertake. I'll take your money and I'll sell you something. But do I want to take your chov? Do I want to take your obligation? That already becomes something much more difficult. So Rabba's theory makes sense. So Afili Yeshlo Yayin Nami, the Hotana Ba'omid Al Garono, right? The Gemara said the case was where he was standing on the threshing floor of the other guy. It wasn't theoretical. He didn't say, lend me something. He says, we're here. I'm the Goren. I'm the threshing floor. Yeshlo Chitten, that I have Chitten. Says Rashi, Vafina Hofa Aser, even so that he had the Chitten, it's Aser because it looks like ribbis. Even though the Chitten is there, but we go so far as to say there's a distinction between the chov and the money, that even though the chitn is there, you can touch it and feel it, it's not money. Okay, can you tell her of Safra? It's not as if he made a deal with him on the chitn, right? Shani noisin l'chor, kishar shel achshav, v'noslim lo. Like for the current price, and that's what he gave him. Because of a lakach memenu, so what was the case? The case was where he lent him the 25 sloim, and he gave him 30 days. Then halfway through, he says, I can't wait 30 days. I need to have cash right now. So he goes back to the lender and says, do me a favor, give me hard cash, and I'll give you back the chitim, but you only have to give me 24 sloim, not 25, which was the original amount of the loan. Also, Gabe Sela, Shehimna Chav Hey Sloim, he was desperate for money. And he couldn't wait for the market to open so that he could get his full value. Then we say muter shaharilo hololo demei achitim yosem demeim b'schar Hamachanos Hamos who could Ozel Gabe. So why do we say that it's not ribis? We say it's not ribis because it's an independent transaction, right? He still owes him the money for the loan. That hasn't been paid off. But since it's a separate transaction and he's selling him, forget about how much the wheat was worth. He's getting 24 slime. That's what he bargained for. So it looks like ribis. That's what he says. It's aromas ribis because it looks like ribis. Remember, we said before that earlier on when we said the conclusion of the previous sugya is ribis mukdemes and ribis mocheres. What do we say that meant? That meant that that if he gave him a gift and then a while later there was a transaction, somehow that looks like ribis. Now, we're not saying it's aromas ribis. It looks like ribis because we say, oh, that he gave him, he lent him and got more back. But we're saying, no, they're separate transactions, right? Um, and it's an inducement, but that's not ribis. But again, to someone who's just watching and observing, he'll say, wait a minute, you're getting more than you bargained for. And that's why this Indian of ribis is such a sort of subtle issue, is because you have to really make a distinction. Here he's making a distinction. He borrowed 30 and then he's selling for 29. Borrowed 25 and he's selling for 24. Okay, so to untrained eye, it may look like ribis. That's why he says it's haramas ribis. But in truth, it's two separate transactions, just like ribis mucheres and ribis mukdemes are separate transactions. Here too, it's two separate transactions, and you can't confuse them and say that it's going to be ribis. So because of a lot of men bedino zov, masnissen kikamar lokach hemenu chitim b'malvek or ukushabolo tovo omalo tenli mos shani lokeach. Here, Rashi is telling you the difference. That in the Mishnah, when he took the chitim b'malvek, it was in a loan. Fine, it was a loan. Ukushabolo tovo, but when he comes to collect omalo tenli mos shani lokeach behen yayin. So in other words, now the transaction is a purchase, not a loan. um, Olai b'dom shloshim dinrin yayin ve'yayin ein lo. So again, the lines get a little bit blurred, but we see that there is a chiluk here as to how you look at the deal. So now the Gemara asks the kasha, why ve'ein lo? In other words, why do you need ve'ein lo? Even if he has, it's okay. Ve'i hava lechamra, and if he had the wine, zuzu yovle mikara upei rishakol mine, that he gave him the money and he took the fruit, lo damila ribis, and it's not comparable to ribis. Why? Because it's a finite deal. He gave him the money, right? Aval mishkamine zuze also the dinozov yovle because shakal mine klossen. But again, if it's not with actual money, then everybody looks at the deal and says, "Wait a minute, there's something going on here." He lent it to him, and he's paying him back more. So it really is a harbinger for what in our times today um, we look at transactions that are with hard money differently than we look necessarily with debt, right? So you can make a lot of deals with a lot of debt, or you can make it with actual transference of money. And so the Gemara is saying that even in those times, there was, whether it was psychological or not, there is a difference between making a deal that's sort of finite because there's money, or whether or not it's a chov. And the chov opens you up to ribis. But if it's hard money, then the transaction ends, and you can't. At least that's what Gemara is saying, that you can't be choshish that there's ribis because the deal is over. So now he brings it back to our Mishnah. Hi, bediner zov, right? Bediner zov akur v'chein ashar ketani. Ve'im kedvarecha shalachim bediner zov. if, according to what you said, he took it for a dinar zov or yahashah shloshim, and the prevailing price was shloshim v'hod ozel gabe, but he kept it by him. The ihashar b'dinar zov v'zeh helam alai shloshim dinar miikara utmina beribis b'shvila hamtanoso. So in the case where um, he he had the produce in his warehouse, or he had it with him, and he transacted with 25 dinar, and now it went up to 30 dinar. So he says that if as long as he has the shar, there is a shar, there's a market price, right? Then the fact that it improved by 5 dinar because it went from 25 to 30, he says, then the L'chaira, he said it would be ribis because there was a 5 sort of dinar appreciation. So according to this, in our Mishnah, we would be talking about ribis because the only reason why it wouldn't be ribis um, is because of the shar. Uh, oh no, so V'ha'ozl the gabe, because he had it in his possession, the ashar bedina zov v'helam alav shloshim dinar mikarot mina beribis b'shil ham chosan. So again, the distinction is if he is holding on to the produce, to the product, and he has it, and it's just a question of him giving it to him over a period of time, then we say, okay, you can give it over a period of time, but the fact that there is a fluctuation in the market doesn't affect the transaction between us because he has the produce in his possession. Okay, so that's where we're up to now. So now we understand Abaya's interpretation. Abaya is saying the chiddush that so according to the kasha that he asks on Rabbah, um, that hold a second. Okay, so all right, so Rabba's position was that you need that there's a chiluk between money and a chayiv, and Abaye came and said that according to Rav Safra's interpretation, that that really doesn't work. That so what is it that works? That that So Abaye is learning pshat in our Mishnah according to Rav Safra. That's the chiddush, is that Rav Safra's theory is applied because beforehand there was no connection between Rav Safra and our Mishnah, our situation. So comes Abaye and he says that you have to that our case you interpret according to Rav Safra, which means what? That that uh, that uh, that there is a haramas ribis. So, um, hold a second. Omar halveni shloshim dinarim. Omalei shloshim dinarim ainli. Chitim b'shloshim dinarim yesh li shani noisim l'cha. Nosan lo chitim b'shloshim dinarim. So it gets a little bit confusing. And so he says, oh, okay. So again, to conclude, so what, according to Abaya, why do you have the question of Ainley? Because according to Rav Safra, it shouldn't matter whether you have it in your possession or not. So the Gemara says, the Yoav is that so if he has the amount Peru Shakel that he give Peru to Shachaminei, then he takes the money for the Paris, the less Lambar, and that's fine. The low, but if he doesn't have the Paris in his possession, given the Leslie Chamra, then even because he doesn't have the wine in his possession, Vade Mishakal Zuzi Mine. Um, and so he'll be taking money from the other fella, Mechzik Ribis. So again, according to Baya, the Yesh Lo is makes a difference in Rav Safra's interpretation because if you again, it's the same thing we said before. If he you can make the transaction because everything is in front of us, right? He'll transact the money for the payers. But if he doesn't have the payers, then he's taking the money, right? He's taking the money, and it'll look like he's taking ribis because he did not give him back the amount that's owed. So again, when I was learning this, this is a little bit intricate here. Um, because you sort of have to understand exactly between the lova and the malva what's going on. Um, According to Abaya, when the fellow came to the malva and he said, you know what, or when he came to came to the malva and he said, you know what, you owe me chitim now of shloshim and I want wine. So he said, ainly. He says, okay, fine, I'll take the wine when you have it, but I need the wine now. So if he needs the wine right now, then Ainley doesn't help. You can't tell him later, Ainley, I'll get it for you, because we're saying that it's not in the marketplace. He doesn't have, you don't say yesh lozeh, yesh lozeh. So he doesn't have the wine. So therefore, if he doesn't have the wine, that really looks like ribis, and therefore, according to Abaya, we need the yeshlo. The only time it works is if he has it. Then, if the fellow demands wine and he doesn't want to wait, he can repay him. But if he can't repay him, then the Gemara says people will look at it and say it looks like ribis. So again, it's a very subtle thing, but at the end of the day, the machlokes between Abaya and Rabbah stems on the fact of whether or not um, you can transact with a debt or transact with money. So according to Rabbah, you have to have the money, and according to Abaya, even without the money. But the problem is that if he comes to demand it, then the chayiv doesn't work. You can't say I'll owe it to you. You have to actually pay him. So therefore, according to Abaya, we also need yeshlo because that's the only way it will not be considered ribs. Right. So again, this is a very complicated, intricate Gemara to understand the chiluk here between what is ribis, what is not ribis, whether you have the money and don't have the money. So okay, so we'll stop here. But again, it's sort of a think about transacting business today in our time and sort of think back to the time of the Gemara, what ribis was, whether or not it's the same. In other words, was there the same Indian of ribis and in transaction? And it seems like there was. And nothing's changed over the generations. Is that haramus ribis or ribis with money or not? It's the same thing. It's the same
So,
thing. So
Rabbi, but for legislating for their time, as their job was, the man in the street then was much more likely to also be a producer of commodities like wine and wheat, and they were more likely to have complicated transactions that slipped from money into commodities more so than nowadays. So they were concerned with a situation where something might slip into actual rivers, where in straight transactions where we don't have commodities in our time, for most people, they were more concerned about something that might actually slip into rivers.
right, but David, I agree with you, but it doesn't mean that the whole marketplace was having to do with commodity. Yes, the Gemara here is giving us examples of commodities and how it interfaces with loans and everything else. But there certainly were people at the time who were transacting without commodities, right? In other words, I need money, I'm going to borrow from you. So you lend me the money, and fine, I'll find a way to get it back to you. The Gemara is giving us the examples of commodity, to make us understand what might be considered ribis. Today, you're right. There's far less transactions having to do with commodities. But when you talk about big business and someone acquires or or you lend money to someone who has a business, then again, he can't pay you in cash, but maybe in stock. Maybe stock is the equivalent of they didn't have stock then, so maybe stock is the equivalent of the commodity that you're now buying a value of this business as if you were buying the actual produce or the product of that business. But I agree that it's far more complicated today than it was in time of the Gemara. But I don't want to leave the impression that in the time of the Gemara, these were the only transactions that were made where ribis is a possibility when we're dealing with, a commodity. Because the same question of ribis can apply in just a straight loan where there's not a commodity. But to your point, a lot of people did. That's what they had. They didn't have cash, right? They were farmers. They were in business, and when they needed money, what can they do? They have to pledge their produce or what they have. So it's true in a way, but it's not 100%, right? It's not like that was the only way business was done. It was done with commodities and without commodities. But in the case of commodities, it complicates matters because if I borrow from you 25 dinar, I pay you back 25 dinar. But the whole point of the subtlety of what we're talking about is that you're exchanging it for commodities that have a market fluctuation and it can go up and down. That's when you get into the question of ribis, is if that fluctuation works against you or for you. So that really, but yeah, that's a good point. So to understand the Gemara, someone asked me this over Shabbos. He said, we learned today things that had no application at the time of the Gemara. So how do you sort of make it work? So you're right. In some cases today, we have I won't say none, but you deal with much more sophisticated deals where there's stock involved or other kinds of exchanges, but we have to take the halacha and extrapolate it as to what it means today. So I think that it's complicated enough just the way it is. But today, so we're very fortunate, right, that we have Heter Iska that allows us to make deals in this complicated time that we're in without having worried to ribis. I have a feeling that without this Heter Iska, a lot of business dealings would either, if you're a from Jew, an Ehrlicher Jew, you'd have a hard time making a lot of these business deals if there wasn't a way. Because again, between Jews, not with a goy, but there's a lot of pressure and when you make these deals. So having a heter iska kind of eases the halacha portion of the deal, and you can make the deal. I find it fascinating, and that's why when we were learning Bava Metzia as young boys, we never learned Eza Neshech because it's one thing to learn Hamafki and you learn the other parakim, but when it comes to Eza Neshech, it's much more complicated.
Shkoyach, have a lot of nachas, Rabbi.
Amen. Thank you very much. Of Simchas. And so next week is Shiva also Batamas. Are we good, Menashe?
I think so. I mean, the question, how many people, there were a couple people who had specific personal things going on today. So I think so. Oh, wait a minute, though. I'll have to get back to it. If we do it, we have to do maybe 10:15 because of Slichos, the davening's longer.
Yeah, that's what I mean. In other words, it'll run a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So
we'll figure it out.
You want to send out the notice, just tell everybody we'll start 10:15.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right.